If you're someone that's struggling with credit, then you most likely struggle with two things. First is making your payments on time, and then second is managing your utilization. So, in this video, what I'm going to do is go over the best way for you to make your credit card payments, when to make those payments on time, and to get the most out of your utilization and keep the utilization as low as possible. So, the first thing is to understand how is it that these two different topics affect your credit. So, when it comes to utilization, it's very important that you understand that utilization makes up 35% of your credit score. So your ability to keep your utilization as low as possible is going to be extremely important. Now, typically, if you go online and you search up what's the best percentage to keep your utilization, you'll hear people say 30%. While if you're watching this video, maybe you're in the process of rebuilding your credit, I typically recommend that you stay anywhere between 1 to 10%. Now, this is more of an aggressive approach, but it also helps you if you're below 700 and you're trying to get into the 700 range. That way you can have better interest rates for different type of products. So again, we want to make sure that we're anywhere between 1 to 10% with our utilization. Now, you may also know that this is going to be extremely difficult if you have a small credit limit. So if you have a credit card, let's say, for example, from Capital One, typically they start you off with a $500 credit limit. That's going to be very hard for you to continuously have a $50 balance reporting every month. That's why it's extremely important that you're consistently trying to increase your credit limit for your credit cards. But we all need to start somewhere. And even myself, I started with a secured credit card. The card that I started with was the Capital One secured MasterCard. Now, the great thing about this card is that you can always place further deposits. So back when I started, I only needed to place the initial deposit of $300. But what I did was I treated it like a glorified savings account. So I would continue to place deposits into the account to increase the limit, which gave me more room for my utilization. Because what I learned through my own experience was that me just using that $300 credit card, it was very difficult for me to keep that utilization as low as possible. Oftentimes, I had a balance of $100 plus. So I knew that I needed to consistently increase that credit limit. Now, at the time, they allowed you to increase that credit limit up to $2,500, which I still think is the same. But I basically put $2,500 onto this credit card. And this is a story that I often bring up and I go to because it's how I got my start into my credit journey. And it's what eventually helped me get into the 800s because that was my foundation. So your foundation needs to be a solid credit card that has a decent limit. Now, once I was able to get the Capital One secure MasterCard to the to $2,500, I was then able to keep it below 10% my utilization. Now, the issue that a lot of people struggle with is knowing when to make their payment. And I like to keep it very simple. A lot of the people that I follow on YouTube or the content that I consume share a similar message. The best time for you to make that payment is on the due date. Now, this time frame on when you're making that payment actually is going to vary depending on who you have your credit card with. So, for example, if you have Capital One, obviously in Canada, Capital One doesn't offer a checking account. So for them, you're going to have to make your payment at a different time. I'm going to dive deeper into this a little bit later in the video, but first I want to speak about if you have a checking account associated with your credit card. So for example, if you have a CIBC credit card, you most likely or hopefully you have a checking account with them. Now, what you're able to do is when you're ready to make a payment from your checking account over to the credit card, you can just easily transfer the funds over to the credit card. Now, if you're not able to do so, you can simply give CIBC a credit card, ask for them to connect that checking account to your credit card. That way you're able to easily transfer the funds over to the credit card. Now, even though the funds don't hit your credit card that day, CIBC and other banks will still recognize this as a same day deposit. So they're still going to count that as you making that payment on time. So this is why I typically like to make my credit card payment on the due date. So if my due date is the 19th, I am paying my credit card off in full. So let's just say I have a $10,000 balance on my CIBC credit card. I am paying that off in full on the due date. And typically the statement releases anywhere between 3 to 4 days. Okay. Now, when that statement releases, that's the information that's going to be sent over to both Equifax and TransUnion. Okay. And then that's what's going to dictate what my utilization is for that following month. So that's why it's so important that you're making that payment on the due date. Now, back to my earlier scenario. If I have a Capital One credit card, again, Capital One in Canada, they do not offer a checking account. It's going to be a lot more difficult for me to make that same day payment. If you were to try to make that payment on the same day, what's actually going to happen is it may be a bit late. Now, the reason why is because it takes at least 2 business days for the payment to get transferred from your checking account from who you originally bank with over to Capital One. Okay. So what you'll need to do to make sure you have the right amount of business days is you need to call your bank and make sure and verify with them how long it takes for them to transfer funds over from your bank to Capital One. Anybody that you call, any teller that you call or speak with, they'll be able to confirm this information for you. So for me, it was 2 business days. Okay. So again, business days is very important that you understand this. This is Monday through Friday. The weekends do not count. So if you have a card or a fintech card, such as the Capital One card, and you don't have a checking account with it, then 2 business days from the payment due date is going to be ideal for you. Now, this is what you're going to do to make sure you keep your utilization below 10%. Now, along with this, you kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone because you're also keeping your utilization below 10% by paying that credit card off in full, and you're making sure that you avoid any late payments that may arrive onto your credit card. Now, you can set up your credit card to where it can take the payments automatically from your checking account. I'm pretty much old school on this way of thinking. I just put the due date in my calendar, and I always, the first of every month, I sit down and I put that information into my calendar, and I get an alarm when I'm supposed to make my payments. That way, there's no errors because banks are known for making errors for the automatic payments and things like that. So I don't want to leave it in their hands. I want to make sure that I have full control on making sure that my credit card payments are paid in full and on time. But you do have the option to set that up automatically with your bank. So after I'm making that payment on time in full, then I need to make sure that I'm doing this consistently. The problem with a lot of the clients that I've worked with in my credit journey or operating my business is that they'll do this for, let's say, 2 months, and then they'll go back to their same habits of just maxing their credit card out and then not making an on-time payment. So it's very important for you to understand that if you're not able to manage the credit card that you have, then you're spending more than what you're bringing in on a monthly basis. And this is going to tell me that you don't have a budget. So it's extremely important that you have a budget in place. So I really mastered using my credit card once I mastered managing my money. And the first thing you're going to need to do is get yourself a budget. So get yourself a budget, make sure you're tracking your expenses, make sure you're tracking your income, and then use your credit card accordingly. If you're very nervous about using a credit card, maybe you have scary family stories, family members have shared with you their bad experiences with credit cards, then you can always start small, maybe just using the credit card to make one purchase, such as gas. But then as you get more comfortable with managing your credit card, then you can graduate into doing gas and groceries. So I think that's a great way to approach kind of starting out by using a credit card if you're nervous with using it. Start with one thing that you make a purchase with that credit card for, and as you get comfortable making those payments on time and in full, then you can add other things within your budget to add on to that credit card. Okay. Now, what the credit bureaus like to see is that you're able to consistently pay your credit card off in full. You're going to be able to do that with a budget. You need to have a budget in place, and you need to be able to manage your money correctly. I always recommend that you keep your utilization below 10% for at least 6 months. If you can do this for at least 6 months, you're going to get the most out of your money. Now, once you manage your credit card for at least 6 months, you've actually created a new habit without you even realizing it. And if you can do this for 6 months, why not go for a year? And then you just want to continue to keep pushing yourself on how long that you can keep that utilization below 10%. Now, at some point, maybe as your income grows, that credit limit that you have on a credit card may not be enough. This is when you can actually go to your bank, ask for a credit limit increase, or go to other institutions and try to apply for different products that you may be interested in. Credit bureaus, the banks, the credit bureaus, they actually view your credit profile as one big revolving line of credit. So let's just say, for example, I have 10 different credit cards and they're all $1,000. They're going to just view that as $10,000. Okay. And then they're going to calculate my utilization based out of that whole pot. So I could have one credit card maxed out, and then that's still going to only be 10%. Right. So now I don't recommend you doing that, but as you grow in your credit journey, then obviously you're going to want to increase your credit limits. That way you give yourself more room within your utilization, and also it gives you more freedom with your finances, and it gives you more options when it comes to having opportunities for yourself. If you found this video helpful, I would really appreciate if you would like, comment any questions that you have, and then most importantly, subscribe. Thank you for watching.